What if Larian created the next Fallout? What if Baldur's Gate was actually just kind of a long-term plan for Larian all along, just so that they could make Divinity Original Sin 3? You see, an interesting article has popped up, which is why I wanted to make this quick video on what Larian had wanted to do, what they had kind of looked at, what was their goals when they were looking at other IPs, and how it could have changed a lot of things, because it brings up a lot of really interesting what ifs when it comes to Larian, Fallout, Ultima, and Baldur's Gate. There were 3 IPs that Swen Vincke wanted to work on, one of which he actually got to. These were all huge household names that would elevate the studio if done well, which obviously we've seen the results of that.
And the game of the year is Baldur's Gate 3.
The 3 IPs were Baldur's Gate, obviously, Fallout, and Ultima. Now of those, of course, Fallout and Baldur's Gate are going to be the ones that are familiar to most people. But Ultima, you have to go back in time a bit because there hasn't been an Ultima game released in the mainline series since 1999. Not including expansions to its MMORPG, Ultima Online. But the game in 1999 was the 10th numbered game in the Ultima series, which started all the way back in 1981. The Ultima series was held by Richard Garriott, or Lord British, a once heralded individual who's now mostly known for going into space and making some quite shit MMO follow-ups. Ultima, however, at the time was at the cutting edge of not just RPGs, but MMORPGs as well. So it makes sense why it would have been such an interesting IP to Swen Vincke. It, alongside Might and Magic and Wizardry, made up some of the foundations of early RPGs after all. But it's also got some pretty wild parts to it. Like the fact that the first game, you use a time machine to go back in time to stop the evil wizard Mondain from getting a gem of immortality so that you can defeat Mondain, because otherwise he was immortal. So basically infusing some sci-fi elements into the fantasy setting from the get-go.
During the earliest span of the Age of Darkness, found in the writings of only the most aged of manuscripts, lived a world born of mystic arts and ancient sorcery, Sosaria. Despite Sosaria's enchanted origins, its people shunned magic, for its very use corrupted the souls of the unwary. But one man dared to awake the slumbering powers of alchemy, twisting the awesome power of the Gem of Immortality to his will and binding all of Sosaria to his corruption. Mondain, the wizard. His power was absolute.
The next IP, of course, got this tweet from Carnage, who is a huge fan of the Fallout genre. And I'm sure many, many more will follow as more people get to see that this was a potential possibility. But Fallout isn't just a series that is extremely well known, but it's also continuing and ongoing. And unlike the other 2 IPs mentioned here, there is a developer that is still currently planning on working on future Fallout games. Fallout first launched in 1997, with its most recent iteration being mixed for its MMO-like game, Fallout 76. But a 5th mainline Fallout game is expected to begin development for Bethesda, eventually, at some point. Maybe in the next decade, I guess. And that's probably not even hyperbole. That's probably when development will start. Because they plan on developing Fallout 5 after they have completed Elder Scrolls 6. Elder Scrolls 6 has no release date, and it's been 6 years since we got the teaser for Elder Scrolls 6. So it's gonna be a while, Fallout fans. It's not like Bethesda is in a hurry to go fast, and they're currently still working on trying to rectify a lot of the issues players had with their most recent release of Starfield, which it sounds like they're kind of doing. The Fallout series has had several different developers over its time period, even overlapping somewhat with Baldur's Gate, Black Isle Studios. And a quick side note here on Black Isle Studios before I forget about it, a few years ago, the remnants of that studio actually brought back two of the games that were instrumental in me starting to like RPGs, and ones that I think are kind of slept on a little bit by people when you mention like some of the best RPGs of all time. Granted, these are not the best RPGs of all time. They don't belong in that conversation, even though I personally love them. But Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 1 and Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2 especially are damn good RPGs. They do lean a bit more towards the ARPG side of things, but if you're looking for more Baldur's Gate stories, they're good games to pick up. And you can get them on PC now because they were officially ported over not too long ago. The stories at this point are a bit dated, I'm not gonna lie, and they do have this like really fun loop of gameplay where it's just like this constant feeling of upgrading your gear, upgrading your skills, and you're just progressing forward and unraveling a story as you do so. But the story of Black Isle Studios probably is deserving of its own video, and I would need to do a shit ton more research than I did for this video, so that'll have to wait. Fallout may be the most intriguing IP mentioned by Swen Vincke here besides the one they actually went with because of its CRPG roots, but it was also probably the least likely given how the franchise has continued and shifted under Bethesda's stewardship, becoming different types of games. Baldur's Gate, on the other hand, was wallowing in near obscurity for years, with past attempts to make the third Baldur's Gate game failing, and even games trying to use something similar, a similar setting, were falling flat, like Dungeons & Dragons Dark Alliance. In fact, you might even be able to say that the entire Dungeons & Dragons IP on the video game side of things was in a lot of trouble. They were in kind of dire straits without any big hits in quite some time. Baldur's Gate was a prime franchise ready to be picked up by Larian Studios. It was sitting there untouched since the closure of Black Isle Studios, under publisher Wizard of the Coast. Swen Vincke got his wish and Larian scored the contract to create Baldur's Gate 3 just as they launched Divinity: Original Sin 2. And I think with a year of retrospection now, we can safely say not only did Larian taking on the IP help Baldur's Gate by potentially setting up a Baldur's Gate 4 in the future or some sort of DLC, but it's been huge for Larian as well, which has catapulted from a lesser known studio but still beloved for its CRPGs like Divinity: Original Sin 2, but to a near household name in itself, with a slew of awards donning their mantles. And a whole new set of fans, not just of Baldur's Gate, but of Larian Studios that are eagerly awaiting their next two games that they're currently working on. Something that may have actually been part of the plan all along. Why did Swen Vincke want to work on these IPs so badly? Was it just a love for the source material? Or was it something else? After all, it's been widely reported that the reason why they're now walking away from these IPs is because they want to do their own thing. Well, perhaps that really was part of the plan all along. As in the interview, Swen goes on to discuss how those particular IPs would have been games a lot of talented people wanted to work on. They also would have been games with AAA production values and budgets. As Vincke himself puts it, from where I was sitting, coming back to my strategic vision for Larian, cinematics made perfect sense. If we were going to bring a game like Original Sin to larger crowds, we would need to have AAA production values, whatever that takes, because it's only then that we're going to discover if there's a market for this type of game. I think it's safe to say that Larian found out that, yeah, there's definitely a pretty damn large market for exactly the type of game that Larian was making. By attaching themselves and their budget to the IP of Baldur's Gate, by getting that AAA budget, by getting that AAA framing, but keeping the heart and soul of the types of games that Larian wanted to make, the types of games that Larian had been making, they were able to do probably something that's a bit unheard of. A win-win in this industry, a win-win where Larian were able to win by raising their profile, raising it to a point where they can do what they want to do as an independent company, because yes, Larian is still technically an independent company. They make and publish their own games for the most part. They're just a huge independent company with hundreds of developers. And now they can go on and make their originals. They can make a Divinity Original Sin 3. They can make something completely different. They could even probably go back to some of those IPs if they wanted to. And on the other side of it, well, Dungeons and Dragons not only has a crown jewel of video games in the 2020s to point to as reason why it's actually something that can translate again in this time frame to modern video games. But they can also probably attract some developers that might not have been interested in the past because, well, you know, maybe making a game like that, maybe they wouldn't have been able to put as much time and effort into it because the idea being, oh, well, you know, there's not going to be a big enough audience for it. Well, Baldur's Gate 3 has proven just how big that audience can be when a game is done right. We don't know that a Baldur's Gate 4 will be done right, though. It's one of those things that remains an open question, but it does sound like there is a very, very real possibility we'll be getting a Baldur's Gate 4, which you can see right here in this video, where I kind of go into what exactly Hasbro wants to do, Hasbro, and by extension, Wizards of the Coast.